Hi future attorneys, today we're decoding the 2025 bar. In this series, we'll not just answer bar questions, we'll also break down the principles, the logic, and the substance behind them. And I'll share strategies to help you craft stronger bar answers. In this video, we will cover questions 1 to 5 of the 2025 Commercial and Taxation Laws Bar Exam. This problem concerns the application of the doctrine of equivalence, one of the tests used to determine whether patent infringement has occurred. The other one is literal infringement. Under the doctrine of equivalence, infringement occurs even if a second invention is not an exact copy of an earlier invention. If the inventions perform substantially the same function in substantially the same way to achieve substantially the same results. In other words, even if a second invention modifies a first invention, there can still be infringement if the function, means, result, test is satisfied. For this suggested answer, you may check out the case of Philips Seafood Philippines Corporation versus Tuna Processors Incorporated, a case decided in 2023. ABC Company is not guilty of patent infringement. Under jurisprudence, there is no patent infringement if the means used by two processes are not substantially the same, even if they perform substantially the same functions and accomplish substantially the same result. This is the function, means, result, or FMR test under the doctrine of equivalence. Here, there is no proof that exposure to filtered smoke in a cooling unit between 10 degrees and 12 degrees Celsius on the one hand and 20 degrees and 24 degrees Celsius on the other cures the ham in substantially the same way. Without proof that the effects of using said temperatures in curing ham are substantially the same, the FMR test is not satisfied. Accordingly, ABC Company cannot be held guilty of infringing XYZ Corporation's patent number I-12345. This is a question about the nationality of corporations. The Revised Corporation Code recognizes a corporation soul as a type of religious corporation. It is formed by a single person, the presiding elder of a church. The presiding elder may be the bishop, the priest, the minister, etc. The Revised Corporation Code also expressly allows the corporation soul to acquire and dispose both real and personal property, subject to certain requirements. The very purpose of a corporation soul is to manage the affairs and properties of the church. But what if the presiding elder is a foreign national? Can the corporation's soul still hold land or real property in the Philippines? Remember that foreign corporations cannot own public or private lands in the Philippines. Foreign corporations can only lease private lands. There's an old case here, the Roman Catholic Apostolic Administrator of Davao Incorporated versus Land Registration Commission. This was decided in 1957, even before the 1987 Constitution. In this case, the court considered a corporation soul as a special type of corporation for holding the properties and managing the affairs of the church. The court did not apply the 60% Filipino ownership requirement. But again, this was decided in 1957. In this case, the presiding elder of a corporation sole is also a foreign national, a Canadian citizen, and the Supreme Court held that that corporation sole is qualified to hold real property in the Philippines. When I'm checking my notes, I found the same principle. A corporation sole whose presiding elder is a foreign national can hold and own real property in the Philippines. But there are two requirements. First is that the membership of the church must be at least 60% Filipino. And second, the properties should be used for religious purposes. However, I did not find the exact case where these principles came from. So please take this suggested answer with a grain of salt, as with the other suggested answers in this series. ABC Corporation is qualified to own real property in the Philippines. Under jurisprudence, a corporation sole formed in accordance with Philippine laws and whose membership is predominantly Filipino citizens is qualified to own real property in the Philippines for religious purposes, even if its presiding elder is a foreign national. Here, although ABC Corporation's presiding elder, X, is a German national, it is formed in accordance with Philippine laws, and all its members are Filipino citizens. Hence, it is qualified to own real property in the Philippines, provided the property will be used for religious purposes. This question is about the E-Commerce Act, or RA 8792. To answer this, we can look at Section 6 of the law. It provides the legal recognition of electronic data messages, and it states that information shall not be denied legal effect, validity, or enforceability solely on the grounds that it is in the data message purporting to give rise to such legal effect, or that it is merely referred to in that electronic data message. This provision basically says that information or even transactions contained in an electronic data message is legally binding. I used Section 6 of RA 8792 to answer this question. Yes, Y is correct. Under the Electronic Commerce Act, information contained in an electronic data message is legally effective, valid, and enforceable. Electronic data messages include information generated, sent, or received by electronic means. Here, Y's screenshot is an electronic data message containing the information that she was first to post the comment, Mine Italy, on one of X's live streams. Such information is legally effective, valid, and enforceable, and it constitutes adequate proof of the existence of a perfected contract of sale. Following X's online selling rules, Y should get the luxury bag with the code name Italy. Thus, Y's argument is not correct. This is a commercial law problem. It mentions the E-Commerce Act, so I just focused on this. Don't commit the mistake of treating this as a civil law problem, just because it involves a question about the perfection of a contract of sale. If I treat this as a civil law, or a contract of sale problem, my answer may be different. I may answer that there's no perfected contract of sale yet, considering that the live streaming is a mere invitation to make an offer. The problem even stated that interested buyers should comment to signify their offer to buy. In other words, commenting on the live stream is just proof that the interested buyer made an offer. The live seller still had to accept that offer for there to be a perfected contract of sale. And it can be argued that if the seller did not award the item to the person who first commented, then that's because the seller did not accept the offer to buy. So there was no perfected contract of sale. But then again, this is a commercial law problem, not a civil law problem. So the suggested answer just focused on the commercial law aspect. To at least address the issue about the perfection of the contract of sale, I just mentioned in the application that since under excess rule, the item should be awarded to the first commenter, then Y should get the bag. This question is about the application of the destination principle and the cross-border doctrine. Although these are not directly stated in the problem, it is implied in A's argument. A here questions the imposition of VAT on the ground that the wine will be consumed in Canada. A is basically invoking the destination principle and the cross-border doctrine. According to the destination principle, goods and services are taxed only in the country where they are consumed. Under the cross-border doctrine, no VAT shall be imposed upon goods destined for consumption outside the territorial border of the taxing authority. But these principles are not to be taken literally. The destination principle and the cross-border doctrine apply in export and import sales. Import sales are subject to VAT, while export sales are not. Although technically, export sales are subject to VAT, but the rate is 0%. Export sales are 0 rated. To determine whether the sale of wine in a local airport is subject to VAT in the context of the destination principle and the cross-border doctrine, we need to determine what kind of sale this is. Is this considered an export sale or a domestic sale? Okay, it is a domestic sale, not an export sale. Export sale is defined under the tax code, section 106A, number 2, subsection A. One definition is this. Export sale is the sale and actual shipment of goods from the Philippines to a foreign country, paid for in acceptable foreign currency, and accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Obviously, the sale of wine at a local airport is not an export sale. It is not shipped to a foreign country. There is also no mention that it is paid in foreign currency. Although it's a Philippine airport, so we can assume that it's paid in pesos. Lastly, it's not accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the BSP, or at least that fact is not mentioned. If this is not an export sale, then what kind of sale is this? The sale of wine in a domestic airport is a domestic sale. It is considered sale of goods in the Philippines. and is subject to VAT under Section 105. With that, here is the suggested answer. No, A is not correct. While the destination principle and cross-border doctrine under jurisprudence state that no VAT shall be imposed on goods destined for consumption outside Philippine territory, they apply only to export sales or those made to a foreign country, but not to the sale of goods in the course of trade or business in the Philippines. The latter is subject to VAT under the National Internal Revenue Code. Here, the sale of wine in a Philippine airport shop does not qualify as an export sale, as it is not made to a foreign country. Rather, it is a domestic sale in the course of trade or business, which is subject to VAT under the tax code. As the destination principle and cross-border doctrine are not applicable, A is not correct in questioning the imposition of VAT. This question is about double insurance. Double insurance is defined under Section 95 of the Insurance Code. It states that double insurance exists when the same person is insured by several insurers separately in respect to the same subject and interest. Under jurisprudence, the requirements are enumerated for double insurance to exist. Number 1, the person insured is the same. Number 2, two or more insurers insuring separately. Number 3, there is identity of subject matter. 4, identity of interest insured. And 5, identity of the risk or peril insured against. You can use the mnemonic PICER to recall the requirements for double insurance to exist. Just relying on the insurance code provision, we can already answer this bar problem. I don't think we need to enumerate all the requirements for double insurance to exist. Section 95 provides that there is double insurance if the same person is insured and the interest insured is the same. In the problem, it is clear that two different persons, X and Y, took separate insurances. The interest insured of these persons are also different. X insured the car as the owner, while Y insured the same car as the mortgagee. Using this, here is the suggested answer. X's claim should be granted. There is no double insurance. Under the insurance code, there is no double insurance when two insurers insure different persons having different interests, even though they involve the same subject matter. Here, the two insurance policies over X's Porsche Carrera GT were taken by two different persons having different interests, X as its owner, while Y as the mortgagee. Even though both insurance policies involve the same Porsche Carrera GT, there is no double insurance. XYZ Insurance's denial of X's claim is therefore unjustified. Take note of how we crafted the legal basis. Section 95 defines what double insurance is. But in our answer, we stated what double insurance is not. Essentially, we reversed the statement in Section 95. We do this so that our answer directly reflects our legal position and our conclusion. It is clearer this way. Also, one final note. Double insurance is not prohibited by law. What is prohibited is double recovery, not double insurance. Section 96 of the Insurance Code provides the effect of double insurance. Essentially, the insured cannot recover more than the value of the insured property. If the insured recovers more, then he should return the excess to the insurer. The insured holds the excess in trust for the insurers. The insured may also file a claim against any of the insurers, and as between the insurers themselves, they are liable proportionately. But these are subject to provisions of the insurance policy. For example, if the policy prohibits overinsurance, then that provision must be complied with. But in this case, there's no mention of any prohibition in the insurance policy. XYZ denied X's claim on the ground that there is double insurance prohibited by law. But then again, we discussed that double insurance is not prohibited per se. It is double recovery that is prohibited. Thank you for listening, future attorneys. Keep studying smart and see you in the next episode of Decoding the 2025 Bar.